Hey guys, welcome. This is week 7 of The Regular.
Yeah.
We're 7 weeks in to our own little church podcast. Isn't it great?
It is.
It's so fun. Just to be clear, even when home groups end, we have 2 more weeks of home groups this week and next week, and then we're still going to record this every week. It'll probably get a little bit longer. We'll probably go 20 to 30 minutes instead of 15. And it's really going to be, the intent is going to be, hey, go in deeper from the Sunday morning messages.
Yeah.
As we've said, a lot of times we don't want to become a busy church. And so one of the things that we can do with technology now is we can create opportunities for growth throughout the week without having to have another thing to attend or
On the
another thing to be
calendar.
at. And you
Yeah.
can watch, listen, whatever you have time. You know, Kate, you like to do it when you're folding laundry. It is the one thing Caitlin does that I hate doing. I don't like doing laundry. I do plenty of stuff around the house. We're balanced.
Yes,
It's not just
yes, we are.
women aren't the only ones that clean in this house, all right? They're the only ones that clean good, but they're not the only ones that clean. So,
Oh my God.
but this week, man, it was a fun Sunday. It's awesome having my little brother. I like to say little to remind him where he falls in the line in the Zick house. He is.
Hopefully you guys can all look at Cole the same after hearing some of those stories. I think.
Oh, John didn't even share the worst ones. I'm thankful. I thought he was G-rated in his story. I appreciated the one that he shared because it took me a while to get healthy as an individual.
Well, what's funny is now it's become ammo in our house because our sons are thinking, I'm not even bad to my brother. Like if you used to spit
I know,
loogie
that's the
on
one
yours,
downfall.
yeah, they're like, now I can do this.
I feel like I lost all credibility in my sons yesterday in telling them what they can and can't do to each other, which I blame John for completely.
Yes, but speaking of John's message, I was so moved by his whole idea of realizing when Jesus told us to abide in him, like to abide, remain in me, and that's how you bear fruit. And I love it. It's actually written on the little board in my office. It's one of my things with Jesus that I've always tried to hold on to is apart from me, you can do nothing. That's where he says to us, apart from me, you can do nothing. Abide in me, remain in me, stay close to me. I love how John even shared, when you think of your relationship with Jesus, when you think of your faith journey, if it feels heavy, if it feels hard, then something's off because he says, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. This is supposed to be the best thing on planet Earth that you experience is this relationship. And so the idea of what abiding in him is a get to, not a have to. I think sometimes that's where we think am I checking all the boxes? But that's where it gets religious versus the relationship. And so the idea of abiding in him is where we get the fruit. That's where we bear fruit. That's where we get the fruit of the Spirit. And the enemy, from the very beginning, I love how he wove it in of just realizing that's what he was after. He was attacking the fact that he didn't want us to stay in relationship with God. He didn't want us to stay in healthy relationship with others. He was going after the unity and the bond of relationship with both Christ and with others. And so it's so
you see it in
important.
relationship too. And I think some of this dialogue that we're having, a lot of the language these last few weeks has been, hey, we need to do this, we need to do this, we need to do this, which there's truth to that. And we do, there are some need tos, right? Like we talked about a couple weeks ago. Not everything's this nice, soft invitation. There are need tos in Scripture. There's challenges. But at the same time, it's the reason that he gives us these need tos or these challenges is because of the beauty, the joy, and the amazingness on the other side. And I've shared this before in different points in this last year, but really a transition for me came in our relationship when I started not looking at dialogue, and I hate to confess this, early on, I forced myself to have conversations with her because I knew I needed to. And it sounds
deep conversation.
Like deep conversation. It's not like I didn't want to talk to Caitlin, but also I wasn't aware of my emotions. I wasn't even emotionally healthy enough or intelligent enough to know what to do with her emotions. So early on in marriage, when a counselor told us, you guys need to talk 45 minutes a day. I'm like, you are outside of your mind. Ain't no 45 minutes in any day that I can talk to her.
Yeah.
And it felt like a chore at first. But what's really wild is even though we started with it as a need to, now, if a day goes by that we haven't had a deep conversation, I'm actually there'll be days where both of us are we haven't talked in a couple days. Kate will bring it up and say, I really like to sit down and chat. There's days that I do and I'm like, man, I feel disconnected. Let's just sit down and talk right now. And once I shifted my brain to realize, wait a sec, I do need to do this with Caitlin, but actually I also realize I want to do this. She's super fun to talk to. I hate to admit this on camera, but she's actually funny sometimes, like a small amount of the time.
I need this clip forever.
She has the ability to be funny sometimes.
Whenever I make him laugh is my favorite thing. I'm like, yes, how can I keep this going?
But it was a little bit of muscle. We had to build the muscle memory early on. Mm-hmm. How do we have kids? How do we do ministry? How do we live the busy, crazy life and make sure we abide with each other?
Yeah.
And, we had to do the need to version of it for a while. And now we're like, we don't need to anymore. Mm-hmm. Man, we get to, and we get tons of life from it. I would say my times talking to Kate is the thing that fills me up the most of anything in life, like hanging out with friends, being by myself. Like on a Friday night, if I've had a long week and it's like, hey, you want to go hang out with people? And I'm feeling overly done. I'm actually like, no, I just want to be with you. Like, this is where I get life because I've allowed the need to move from a religious thing to a enjoyable thing, right? And so I think that's really it. Like, that's the invitation. And I love the picture that John created yesterday of do you abide or do you hide? Because it's really easy to hide because you realize you get into a couple deep dialogues with the Lord and you're like, oh, he wants to bring up things I didn't want to talk about. He wants to point out things that I wasn't ready to point out. Conversation, fellowship-wise with each other can be like scary because you're like, oh, well, what if we end up talking about something that is deep and is painful? And so a lot of times our natural response becomes to hide. And I think the excitement is the other side of getting over the challenge of building relationship with each other is this beautiful opportunity to stop being scared of deep conversations. We get to stop being scared of the intimate moments with each other. And now it's like I actually look forward to, hey, can we address this? We got to talk through this. And so it's the same way with the Lord, and it's the same way with each other. And so I think the challenge from yesterday, and we're going to kind of transition a little bit here in the podcast, but to sum up yesterday is doing an evaluation. Do I tend to abide or do I tend to hide from depth? Am I leaning into depth with the Lord? Am I leaning into depth with others? Or do I tend to hide from that? And what can I do to kind of shift my mindset without putting a religious weight on it? Like, I don't want to create I have to talk to people, I have to talk to others, and I got to do this as a chore. But I also want to challenge myself to not hide from the deep moments. Yeah,
I think when you say depth, and I think of the opposite, where it's like, are you more comfortable in the surface level rather than going deep? But when I think of surface level living, I think of like you're kind of just surviving, because almost like thriving would be going deep, right? So the surviving or the thriving is the surface level or the deep. But sometimes we're in a season where we might even have gotten there without consciously deciding. We're not thinking, oh, I'm avoiding depth. But you're like, I'm in this survival mode where I'm trying to keep everything just maintained and surface level. But so that's a good question, I think, to ask yourself, reflect on, and be able to think like, wow, where am I? Have I gotten so overwhelmed or stressed or busy in some season that I'm in that I'm staying in the surface level with God and with others?
So question that we'll ask for the end, are you abiding or hiding? And just be real and open. You guys have been together for 7 weeks now. Like, no warm-up questions. Go for it. Am I abiding or am I hiding?
I love it. And then we wanted to read the scripture from Philippians where Paul, I'm reading it in the Message paraphrase, which John shared on Sunday as well. It says, if you've gotten anything at all out of following Christ, if his love has made any difference in your life, if being in a community of the Spirit means anything to you, if you have a heart, if you care, basically if you're breathing, then do me a favor. Agree with each other. Love each other. Be deep-spirited friends. Don't push your way to the front. Don't sweet talk your way to the top. Put yourself aside and help others get ahead. Don't be obsessed with getting your own advantage. Forget yourselves long enough to lend a helping hand.
Yeah, it's such a great depiction of, I think, what the goal of church is. Yeah. Like as we've been defining that, these statements of if his love has made a difference in your life, if being in a community of spirit means anything to you, if you have a heart, if you cared, then do me a favor. And I love the instruction here. Agree with each other, love each other, be deep-spirited friends. The way that I perceive that scripture right there is not agree with each other on everything, but find where you agree and let that be the most important thing.
Yeah.
Right? Let that be the thing that matters most. I believe that Jesus died on the cross for my sins, that he lived as God on planet Earth, and it is because of the resurrection that we have power and authority over the dark realm. When that is my core, I can disagree with you on just about everything else and still deeply love you and be deep-spirited friends with you.
Yeah.
I think it was only the second service I shared this yesterday, but after the politics message I did a few weeks ago, I had probably one of, and we've been pastors now for 15 months of Risen King. I probably had my most favorite conversation I've had. And I'm not going to mention the person, but I just had this person that wanted to talk, and we did a FaceTime call, and they just shared, man, I loved this about the message. I loved this, but this part really hung me up. And we spent about 45 minutes or an hour talking about what we believe. He shared his heart with me. I shared my heart. And we got to the end of the conversation, and I just said to him, I don't know that we're going to agree on this, but I'm okay with disagreeing if you are. And he's like, I'm okay with disagreeing. And we both, I can say this, we both actually felt more deeply connected. And I can truly say I grew in love for him in this conversation.
That's awesome.
And I'm pretty sure they did for me. He did for me too. But that to me is the picture. We agree on the cross. And you know what? That's way more important than any other topic. And we built a deep-spirited connection in this moment. I think both of us walked away feeling, wow, I actually feel more known, more loved, more valued because we were able to disagree and still feel connected. I think that really is what Philippians is talking about. We've recited Acts 2 a bunch where this word for fellowship is actually koinonia.
Yeah.
And koinonia in these scriptures is met with this. It's fellowship, close association between persons, emphasizing what is in common between them. Emphasizing what is in common between them. That, even that description of koinonia says not everything is in common. But we're going to choose to emphasize what is in common, celebrate that, be bonded together because of what's in common. And that actually is strong enough to bind us when we don't agree.
Yeah.
And so now all of a sudden, I'm not forcing myself to have good relationships. Healthy relationships become the natural byproduct of making all my relationships about the cross.
Yeah.
I'm choosing to abide in him. I'm making my abiding in him the priority. That then brings the fruit that John talked about, peace, patience, kindness. We're going to do that in a second. And when that becomes the natural byproduct, what happens now is because I'm focusing on what's in common, I actually can also talk deeply about what we don't have in common, and it doesn't have to bring points of pain. It actually makes us a stronger, more tightly knit community.
That's so good. And I will say that's a gift of yours and something that I was going to share because it's fresh for me this week, is I kind of tend to do the opposite, is my natural bent. And so even realizing it and honestly being confronted by it a little bit through the message was realizing that I can go black and white pretty quickly. So this week I had an opportunity for disagreement and conflict with somebody, and it actually felt more of like an injustice, and it was involving my kids. So I get a little bit mama bear then. And so I've had to do a lot of reflection and talking to the Lord about like, how am I, what's my perspective in this situation? And I was realizing that I actually go to villain really quickly. So somebody that I was like, I love this person, I trust this person, I talk highly of this person, but they did this one thing that then just felt like I was able to quickly put this like villain mask on them and think they're the enemy, which I know where that comes from. That is not from God. So then it really took me peeling back the layers to be like, wow, Caitlin, calm down. Again, I think nothing gets you like the mama bear. I'm like, if this would have happened to probably anybody else or even Cole, I'd be like, get over it. But I'm like, the injustice in me is rising up. So I'm realizing, okay, peel back the layers, take off the villain mask, and be able to see like, oh, we're just disagreeing about something, and there's probably more sides to the story, there's more conversation to have. So I think realizing that, and John kind of talked about this on Sunday, like we can be really quick to offense and bitterness. We have so many reasons that the enemy is trying to drive a wedge in the relationships in our life. It might be somebody in your family, in your friendship, in your church, in your home group, in your workspace, or even somebody that's kind of far away, where you're like, I'm just seeing something they do. I'm not even having a one-on-one relationship or conversation, but it's driving a wedge that now I'm writing this person off and creating a villain story about how they are in my life.
It's great,
So I
babe.
think it's really
So
important to realize that when we abide in him, the fruit of the Spirit is what we get as a result. And you need the fruit of the Spirit to be in relationship with anybody.
Yeah.
So the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control.
John said them all from memory on Sunday.
I was
had
thinking
to
you were going to
read.
point that out. And here's what I would like to point out. I wasn't raised in a Christian home singing the Fruits of the Spirit song, okay? I know it's a song you guys all learned. I didn't learn the song. And so realizing that these fruits are so necessary for any relationship. Like if I don't have patience, not going to be in a healthy relationship.
Yeah, it's great,
If I
babe.
don't have kindness and love and peace, like I can't do it. I'm going to break every relationship I'm in without these fruits.
Yeah, that's great.
And so I think that's a good question also to reflect on, is kind of what is your go-to? Do you kind of go quickly to like, oh, that person offended me, and you write them off, or you get bitter, or you kind of just distance yourself? Or do you lean in to be able to say, I'm not going to let the enemy drive a wedge between this relationship that matters to me, or even this perspective I have towards a person? So also asking yourself, what fruit of the Spirit are you probably what muscle are you needing to work for the Spirit realm? So if you're like,
hold on, I
wow.
want to rephrase that one.
Okay,
actually.
good. Go for it.
So just to kind of wrap up, I think what you just said is really great. I think it's really good to do an assessment, or just, I guess, a reminder. Make sure you keep the villain in your mind, which it's the enemy, not the person. And make sure you keep the family. Right? Like make sure that we're keeping people in the right buckets in our mind. Because when it's family, when I keep family in the family bucket, I actually work through conflict better with them.
Yeah.
Right? Like when I have determined I'm with this person, ride or die, the way that I engage in things is so much healthier, right? I want to honor, even if I'm having to say a hard thing, I can say a hard thing in an honoring way. Right? And so the wrap-up questions are this. Do you tend to abide or hide? From the first one.
Yep.
And then what I think would be cool in the groups today is, instead of sharing what do you need to work on in the fruit of the Spirit, why don't you go around and point out what fruit of the Spirit you see in each other?
Oh, that's cool.
Sometimes it's helpful to just know, wait a second, I'm not doing horrible at everything, and I'm not off base on every area, and it can feel like, oh, there's all these fruits of the Spirit, I'm not doing any of these well. You actually probably are doing a lot of them better than you think that you're doing. And it might be good just to hear that from somebody else in your group. And so take a minute after you guys share it. Are you abiding or hiding, or what is your tendency? And just go around and say, man, I actually think you love really well. Here's an example. I actually think you're really kind. Here's an example. And start to point out where you see the fruit of the Spirit in each other. And I think just leaning into that, it actually is going to be a greater motivator to tackle the areas that maybe you could work on a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And so encourage you guys to spend a little bit of time on those two things.
I love it.
Any final thoughts, babe?
No, we'll see you next week.